Welcome. Much of my work today focuses on high-functioning men. These men are responsible, driven, capable. They're often successful professionally and deeply committed to their families. But many of them quietly struggle with something they've never been taught how to handle. What do you do when emotional pressure builds? They tell me things like, I want to communicate better, but I shut down. I love my partner, but our conversations escalate. I carry stress all day and then bring it home with me. These men are not failing. They're simply trying to navigate the emotional experiences without the tools that will allow them to stay steady and present. I'm Dr. KenMartz. I'm a psychologist who spent over 30 years working in the fields of emotional regulation, addiction treatment, leadership development, and relationships. Throughout my career, I've had the privilege of working with thousands of individuals and families, people navigating stress and conflict, recovery, leadership pressure, and the daily challenges of maintaining meaningful relationships. One pattern I've seen over and again is this. People are never actually taught how to listen, not really listen. We're taught to respond. We're taught to defend. We're taught to solve problems. But we're rarely taught how to stay present with another human being when emotions are involved. And when listening breaks down, empathy breaks down. And when empathy breaks down, relationships begin to erode. That's why I care so much and so deeply about this topic. Listening is not just a communication skill, it's a nervous system skill. It's a regulation skill. Ultimately, it's a relationship skill. Because disconnection is rarely a skills problem, it's an emotional problem. Listening and empathy skills are the doorway to healthier relationships. When people feel heard, their nervous system settles. When someone feels understood, that defensiveness drops. When defensiveness drops, real conversations become possible. So today we're going to practice some of the specific listening and empathy skills and tools that help people to stay present in difficult conversations. These are skills that improve relationships with partners, with children, with coworkers, even with ourselves. We often think that success comes from intelligence or strategy or discipline, but the real game changer is connection. The most effective leaders aren't just the smartest, they're the ones that people trust and follow. The strongest relationships aren't just based on love, they're built on understanding and emotional safety. So we really want to shift our mindsets from nice to have to this is essential. High achievers often chase results while unintentionally damaging the very relationships that sustain those results. Consider that influence is not built on competence alone, it's built on emotional safety. Think about the most influential leader you've had. Was it purely their intelligence or how people felt around them? These connections are critical. Have you ever felt like you're winning in your career but struggling at home, or vice versa? Many high performers experience emotional disconnection. It can lead them to make teams, to make decisions, but struggle in personal relationships. When that connection is missing, both leadership and love suffer. The struggle can be normal. At work, that disconnection looks like disengagement, politics, or miscommunication. But at home, it looks like distance, recurring arguments, and emotional fatigue. Many successful people are winning professionally while quietly losing relationally. And the nervous system pays the price. Let's consider some of the myths of communication. Communication is not just talking. It's alignment. It's about building that understanding and attunement to each other. Clarity does not guarantee understanding. It seems like we need to be clearer, but often it's about the feeling and the perspective and the emotions and the context. Conflict avoidance is not the same thing as harmony. Sometimes a healthy conflict is a sign of strong communication, and that we're working things through, not just avoiding them. Digital efficiency is not emotional inaccuracy. We may text things. That's not the same thing as sitting down eye to eye, face to face, heart to heart, with all the tone and language and verbiage that happens in our conversations. Emotion is always present, whether we acknowledge it or not. We can try to pretend like we don't have feelings, but every conversation we have, every desire we have is based in our emotions. So when these types of communications and conversations fail, it's often not a language failure, it's an emotional attunement failure. It's a lack of that interaction and understanding of this more complex nature about connecting. Neuroscience shows that trust and connection aren't just soft skills, they're biological necessities. Oxytocin is one of the chemicals that makes us feel safe in relationships, whether it's in leadership or love. Developing emotional intelligence isn't just beneficial, it's essential for long-term success. So think about this in the context of performance outcomes. Connections improves resilience and decision-making and collaboration and confidence. People regulate better in safe relationships. Teams function better when psychological safety exists. So that connection reduces friction, and that friction is a hidden tax on performance, on our relationship, our self-worth, and our productivity at home or at work. Let's talk for a moment about the 3 core pillars of emotional connection. If you've got all 3 of these, it becomes much stronger. This pyramid represents the 6 components of effective listening. Listening isn't just one skill, it's a process that moves from self-awareness to meaningful response. At the foundation is knowing yourself, being aware of your own reactions so you can stay present. From there, we begin reflecting on what the person is sharing. First, the situation, the emotion, and eventually the deeper emotion underneath the words. At the top of the pyramid is the goal of the whole process, responding authentically and speaking from the heart. Over the next few slides, we'll walk through each level and see how these skills build on one another to create a deeper understanding and stronger relationships. Pillar 1, emotional intelligence is the foundation of strong leadership and deep relationships. If you can name your emotions, you can manage them. The emotional circle tool is a great way to improve that emotional awareness. So one way to think about it is that emotional intelligence is not about being emotional. It's about being skillful with emotions. So high EQ individuals experience emotions without being driven and blinded by them. So the emotional circle tool gives the language of that internal experience, and that language reduces that reactivity. So we'll break this down step by step. Emotional intelligence is that foundation, and so that empathy begins internally. If I cannot identify my own emotional state, I'll project it, I will defend it, I will suppress it. So ask yourself, what are you feeling right now? Notice it may not be easy to identify. Most adults were never taught emotional literacy. Empathy does not begin with other people. It begins with self-awareness. Most individuals move through their day reacting to their emotions that they never consciously identified. And so stress becomes a tone. Anxiety becomes an urgency. Frustration becomes irritability. Fatigue becomes withdrawal. If I can't accurately recognize my own emotional state, I will misinterpret the world. So what are you feeling right now? For many adults, this is not an easy question because we were trained to report, not trained to report our thoughts. We start with things like, I think, I believe, I should. But emotions operate underneath cognition. These unlabeled emotions drive behaviors more powerfully than any labeled emotions. And when emotions become vague, they feel overwhelming. And once we name them, they become more manageable. Emotional literacy is emotional regulation. So notice your default states. If you live in pressure, in irritation, or in worry, or quiet exhaustion, that self-awareness is not self-analysis. It's simply accurately noticing. Sometimes it may start with a simple feeling word such as fear, anger, happy, worry, or sadness. Start here, begin from there. Once we know how we are feeling, become better at identifying it, we can better listen and identify it in others. This begins the empathy process here. Most listening is defensive listening. We reply, we listen to correct when we're trying to think what our next response is going to be to defend or fix it. Reflecting content signals a cognitive understanding. Some simple examples would be like, so what you're saying is ... This is simple and powerful, and it's rarely practiced consistently. You're shifting from that internal to an interpersonal skill. Most listening is not really listening. It's waiting, preparing rebuttals, planning advice, defending positions. But think about this. When people feel unheard, they escalate. Their volume increases, their emotion intensifies, the conflict grows. Reflecting content is deceptively simple. It communicates, I hear your message, I understand your perspective. I'm not immediately resisting you. So some examples could be things like, so what you're saying is, it sounds like, if I'm hearing you correctly, etc. It's important to understand that this is not agreement. This is alignment. And that alignment lowers defensiveness. If you think about it this way, people relax when they feel cognitively understood because it shifts the brain from threat detection to engagement. Now, one mistake to watch out for here is that many people jump too quickly into fixing things, and we try to offer solutions before understanding. And this can create resistance. Giving advice without this validation feels like a dismissal. Just starting with this simple reflection creates a little bit of space, and that's where connection lives. Ask yourself, how often do I truly listen without planning my response? Start here. Have you ever held a conversation where you felt truly heard? That's deep level communication. The best leaders and partners know how to move beyond the surface and the tactical talk to true connection. where the goal isn't just to communicate, it's to make the other person feel understood. So with pillar 2, think about how communication has different levels. It may be surface, it may be tactical, it may be deep. And most relationships stall because the conversations never reach the depth. So depth requires a bit of tolerance for discomfort, and that connection strengthens when these conversations move from information exchange to emotional exchange. Where do your conversations typically live? At which level? With pillar 2, begin to recognize this so we can change it and move it deeper. This is not just a graphic. It's a cognitive emotional bridge. I use this with folks all the time. When individuals are struggling to articulate feelings, conversations become vague and reactive. And this precision in language helps to create the emotional clarity. You can't regulate what you can't articulate. You can't regulate it if you can't accurately label it, if you don't know what it is. And so this becomes a tool to identify the range of the 5 core emotions and begin to think about when it is intense in different ways. The emotional circle tool is a great way to improve emotional awareness. So we're beginning this shift from content to emotion. In Empathy 102, we talked about reflecting the content. Here we're adding a reflection of the emotion. Reflecting on that emotion signals a psychological understanding that you're no longer just hearing the story, you're hearing the experience. So for example, that sounds frustrating. You seem disappointed. That must have been scary. People calm down faster when they feel emotionally understood. So with this step, we're deepening those skills. Reflecting the content tells them that you understand their words, but reflecting the emotion tells them that you understand their experience. And this is where conversations change quality and move from superficial down into depth. Because humans are rarely upset about facts alone. They're reacting to feelings attached to those facts. Stress, fear, disappointment, embarrassment, feeling dismissed, feeling unappreciated. So keep practicing with other examples. That sounds frustrating. You seem disappointed. It sounds like that really bothered you. That emotionally accurate reflection reduces the emotional intensity, not because the problem disappears, but because the nervous system feels seen. Most people don't need immediate solutions. They need emotional acknowledgement. And without emotional reflection, conversations remain intellectual while emotions remain unresolved. This is what leads to the repetition of the same conflicts, the same topic, the same argument, the same emotional loop. Reflection interrupts that loop, and interruption creates the possibility of change. So ask yourself, how often do you respond to emotions with logic instead of understanding? Logic without empathy feels cold. Empathy without logic feels incomplete. But empathy first stabilizes the interaction, and then the logic becomes usable. And now we begin to put these pieces together. We want to begin to listen to and reflect both the situation and the emotion. So you feel X, label the emotion, because Y. This is just a very simple response. Notice it begins with the feeling and then moves into the situation. This is where conversations transform. So for example, so you feel overwhelmed because the workload keeps expanding. This creates coherence. It helps the speaker feel seen rather than analyzed. And feeling seen is the foundation of that connection. I often use these feelings wheel with clients to help them identify what their emotion is at the moment. It's useful to begin with the core 5 emotions in the center to identify which category you are in. And then you can begin to look outside to the other 2 layers of the circle to find synonyms to things that are in that family to help further articulate what I'm feeling. So for example, it may be that I'm feeling a bit sad, but when I look a little bit closer, it's actually a little bit lonely and hopeless. And I may need to respond a certain way to that. Someone else might feel a bit sad, and when they look a little deeper, they're actually feeling hurt and embarrassed. So this feelings wheel helps to articulate the nuance, because when I understand more precisely what type of emotion it is, the solution will be different based on what the cause and what the emotional experience is. The better we know and articulate, we're that much closer to change. Emotional intelligence is that foundation of strong leadership and deep relationships. So if you can name these emotions, you can manage them. This emotional circle tool can help us to go deeper as well. Up till now, we've been focusing on that content, the emotion, and the situation, and now we really deepen that lens, because most people just express the surface emotions: frustrated, annoyed, stressed, fine. But surface emotions are often protective layers. Whatever category the surface emotion, consider the category counterclockwise from it. So to the left of anger is the fear category. To the left of the fear category is the sad category. So for example, each of these may have an emotion that's hidden underneath of it in that order. So underneath my anger, there may be some fear. Underneath the fear, there may be some hurt. Deeper empathy listens for what is not explicitly said. So when someone says, "This is ridiculous," they may be expressing irritation, but irritation often sits on top of something more vulnerable. For example, feeling afraid that they're alone, feeling dismissed, feeling unappreciated. So you can say some things like, "It sounds like you're not just frustrated, you might also be feeling a bit scared." Or, "You seem scared, but maybe there's also some disappointment in there." So when deeper emotions are acknowledged, that defensiveness softens, because now the conversation moves from reaction to experience. People rarely argue about the facts. They argue from these unrecognized emotional states. At this step, we bring it all back together, including my personal feelings, as well as my understanding of the other person's situation and emotions. At its highest level, empathy becomes less technique and more about a presence. We've been practicing using the words, but this is where conversations stop feeling like communication strategies and start feeling like a human connection. So Speaking from the heart is not emotional dumping. It's an honest, regulated expression. Listening from the heart is not passive agreement. It's open, non-defensive attention. So consider that heart-centered communication requires three things: safety, vulnerability, and regulation. So you might say some things like, so what I'm really feeling is, what matters most to me in this situation is, what I'm afraid of is. Notice these beginning moments add my experience to the conversation. This is where a level of dialogue and trust begins and deepens, because this authenticity reduces that psychological distance. In leadership, this builds loyalty. In relationships, it builds intimacy. Hey, I'm really worried about you because I see that you've been struggling at work and feeling really alone in that struggle. You see how this one simple statement begins to pull these pieces together. So think about this. Consider your most important relationship. What conversation are you avoiding that requires this level of honesty? Connection rarely fails because people lack intelligence. It fails because conversations never reach emotional truth. If you want a deeper connection, start by identifying where you're disconnected. Have some small shifts like active listening, emotional awareness, and consistency. These make a massive impact. Connection isn't built on big dramatic gestures, it's built on daily habits. So begin with these steps to kind of walk through your experience, first by recognizing, where do I currently struggle with that connection? And reframe that a little bit from a transactional to a transformative relationship, moving it deeper in some of the ways we think about developing that empathy, and then refine it. It's not a once and done conversation. It's daily habits, words, and beliefs to strengthen that connection. So let's bring this together and put a plan to put it into action. Choose one of these things you've been learning from today and plan to start that as a new habit today. Commit to improving on it, even if it's just 1% every day for a lifetime. Remember that it takes a village to build these relationships, but you're not alone. It's a whole community and similar pathways growing here with you. For some people, a workshop like today is enough to spark change. But for many people, they realize something deeper. They recognize that developing emotional strength in relationships isn't a one-time conversation, it's a practice. That's why I also run the program called the Unshakable Relationships. It's a structured weekend experience for men who want to strengthen communication, manage stress effectively, and show up with greater emotional presence in their relationships. We'll work on the very skills we're discussing today: learning, listening, empathy, emotional regulation, but in a deeper, more experiential way. This helps to get a moment to step away from the daily pressures and reflect honestly on what their relationship patterns are. Explore some of those emotional habits that are shaping our communication and our connection or lack thereof. Experience some meaningful conversations with other men who are committed to growth. We can develop greater emotional presence and self-awareness and strengthen our capacity for connection, for leadership, and relational trust. We will leave with a plan for implementation into life. This is an opportunity to slow down, look inward, and grow along others doing the same work. and lets us move beyond theory into applied emotional strength. If these ideas we discussed today resonate with you, either for yourself or someone in your life, I'd love to continue the conversation. The next Unshakable Relationships weekend is in Ocean City, Maryland, March 27th to 29th. It's a small group environment designed to help men build practical tools, strengthen communication skills, and connect with other men who are committed to growth. This is normally $2,900, but today it is just $750. You can also enroll in a payment plan of 4 payments of just $220 if you can't afford that. If you join today, we're going to give you some other benefits, though, to make this absolute no-brainer. So today, you can bring a friend for free. It is always more fun, and you're more likely to carry it forward if you have somebody with you. You'll also get my coping skills toolbox with dozens of tools from my decades of practice to make it easier to take the tools with you, practice along the way, even before, during, and after the program. And we'll set up a time to meet one-to-one where you and I can sit down together, develop a plan for implementation to make sure that you are set up for success in every way. Click the link to enroll now. Thank you for spending this time together today. Listening and empathy are deceptively simple skills, but they have an extraordinary impact on our relationships, our work, and the way we move through the world. Often the most meaningful change begins not with grand gestures, but with something quieter. Being willing to pause, to stay present, and truly hear another person. My hope is that today's conversation encourages you to bring a little bit more curiosity, patience, and openness into the conversations that matter most in your life. If anything we discussed today resonated with you, I'd be glad to continue the conversation afterward. And for those of you interested in exploring this work more deeply, I'll see you at the Unshakable Relationships Weekend Intensive. For now, thank you for your attention, your participation, and the thoughtful energy you bring today. I appreciate being able to spend this time with you. Until next time.